Thank you. And I don't know how you feel, but is it hot in here? Maybe can we get some fresh air? Because I mean, this is the end of the day, and I need some fresh brains now to be ready for the next year. It's just kind of a little requirement. I thought it was a little bit hot. But thank you for seeing me here. I asked Brian when he called to say, am I the right person for this highly technical seminar or conference that is happening out here? And he said, that's just maybe kind of, you can come and learn something. And I've been listening to a couple of sessions this morning, and I'm puzzled by the amount of inside information and technical level here. This is really high. And I also have to say that I have a thing with engineers. I don't know, is there any engineers in the room? You know, engineers in my world, engineers is the most arrogant people we know. But also at the same time, they're very nice to know, because you can always call them and ask questions, and they'll come up with an answer for sure, because there's so much inside information shared by engineers that we need to be friends with you. So no offense, I'll talk on behalf of a community. I'm from Samsø, which is a small community in the middle of Denmark, and I'll come back to that also. We became the Danish energy island after Kyoto. Our Japanese friends who are here today hosted the COP3 in 1997, where the Kyoto Protocol was signed, and our minister of that time, he came home to Denmark and said Denmark was going to bring down the CO2 emission by 21%, which was kind of a great surprise to industry in Denmark. Said, how are we going to do that? Maybe not the wind industry, but many other industries was not really so happy about that. That would be damaging the competition and all the things we were worried about. So how are we going to do this? He said to him, I'll demonstrate it can happen. We'll select an island, a community in Denmark, to be 100% self-supplied by renewable energy in just 10 years' time, with technical the development of technology of today, with the Danish policies and subsidy programs, and with the aid of widespread public participation. I mean, everybody knows what that means, right? You can nod if you know what's widespread public participation means. I mean, because it was an engineer from the mainland. I mean, he was actually from a Danish company called Plan Energy. He was not really from Jutland. He was from Copenhagen, but he lived in Jutland. So he was not a real Jutland person, which is important in Denmark. There's a difference from being from Copenhagen and to be from Jutland. I mean, a very significant quality. Maybe that's going too much in details, but he called the local mayor, who is a farmer from Samsø, and said to him, we have this opportunity to win this competition and be the Danish energy island, and Samsø can demonstrate that this is possible. This will probably give a lot of work, a lot of business, and a lot of support from the government. And the mayor kind of liked the idea about support from the government, so he said, this is a good idea. But we need to call the chairman of the Trade and Business Association in Samsø. He's a blacksmith. He was called the goldsmith on Samsø. Not because he did a lot of goldsmithy's work, but he was very good with invoices. So he thought this is going to be good business also, because there's a lot of piping, a lot of drenching, a lot of welding, and a lot of exchange of energy systems. So let's do this. So these three guys, they decided to run for this competition, and they actually won the competition, and we became the Danish energy island. So widespread public participation is 3 persons. So I will come back to that. The 3 most important person is the decision makers. So I'm describing this as a commonity. You might think I'm not able to spell the English language, but this is a construction of commonity is common plus community. So the commons is what we share, community is who we are, and the community administrating the commons must be commonity. Do you buy that? It's a new word, but let's see how it's going to be operated in the future. There's peer-to-peer, there's blockchain, there's many new words we need to learn here. So I was amused by your presentation. As an island, we like to be special. We like to be special, but we also like to be like anybody else. We like to have the same rights, the same opportunities, but still have this biodiversity of us. We want to be us, not something kind of general. We like to be that. We also like to be part of a system. But if you see that this is the Danish system, this is the backbone of the system in Denmark. And this is my island in the middle. You can see this is all the lines and the big important structures here. There's no connection here. There's no sign of any action on my island. This is the arrogant Denmark describing how the Danish system is operating. If I'd been here, there's been a lot of windmills and a lot of connections and power structures in this map here also. But this is how we are looked at. We are a little insignificant fleck of land in the middle of the ocean. Collaboration between sectors is a necessary condition for a successful, sustainable transition. So this is what we set off to do here also. We know we cannot do everything ourselves. We have to reach out and meet kind of people who can help us do this. Institutions, academic universities, industry, business people, and all these sort of things here also. So we kind of sat down and talked about who is our friends here who will help us do this. And in less than 10 years, almost in 8 years, we managed to make a production that was higher than our consumption. So when we added up the numbers, we were, after 8 years, more than 100% self-supplied. We produced more electricity than we consumed. We produced more heat than we consumed, and we actually exported from offshore wind turbines more energy than the entire transportation needed also. So the CO2 numbers were negative. We had a minus 3.7 tons emission per capita after 8 years. That was those days' calculation methods. I mean, today it's a different calculator, so it doesn't really end up that positive anymore. But we invested this. It was in a period where oil cost about $30 on the world market per barrel, and we invested almost 500 million Danish kroner in the projects. I mean, we added up more than this. This was the prediction, but we ended up doing that, shared by less than 4,000 people. So it was a huge investment. This was business seen from a perspective of local ownership and kind of peer-to-peer. We actually did this because it meant a lot of things. I'll come back to that. So this is my island. You can see how beautiful it is. Very, very nice. And in this island, we were going to put up ugly wind turbines. I don't know if anybody of you live near a wind turbine. But we have this discussion all the time that we need them, but we don't like them. And why don't we like them? We like them mainly not because we don't own them. So there's a conflict here in the ownership, that we like the idea of green energy and kind of a green transition, but we don't really like the structures out there. So we had to have a new discussion. So you can see here, there's actually a smokestack here in future. This is the nearby power station in Kalundborg, 15, 20 kilometers away. So this is Asnæsværket. That was, on these days, it was based on coal. Today it's shut down because of a decentralized structure in Denmark. But these days it was coal. So we had acid rain raining over our lands. So the farmers had to put more lime on the land to grow things here also. We were actually polluted by the neighbor power company here. So actually, I don't know, you call them windmills, Paul. We call them ventilators. We announced this to be ventilating the smoke away from Samsø. So the argument was not so much to set up wind turbines, but we were pushing the pollution away from us because we could produce green energy instead of black energy. That was a very convincing argument. And the other thing was we also wanted to own them. So after a few years, we actually also erected some of the biggest offshore wind turbines. We learned a lot from Middelgrund's offshore wind turbines out here, and we had some of the deepest offshore structures here. I think you helped us do that. It was a very impressive exercise to do this, and we never done anything like this before. But we actually raised 220 million Danish kroner to make this project, and it was then owned by local people and local community. So we invested in that. It was highly risky because we didn't know what we were doing, not at all. But it was part of the plan. And this is interesting also, that planning became our tool to talk about the future for the local community. I mean, we are a community and we want to survive. How can we do this? So in renewable energy and technology in this area here was a means to make this change. We used kind of the technology of today. We used solar panels for hot water, and for district heating, we tapped energy out of biomass resources to exchange the oil import. So we imported oil, but this is an image I hope you understand. This is not directly how we did it. I can explain later if it's necessary. So we had these resources. The straw was sitting out in the fields waiting for us to use it instead of importing oil from outside with a changing oil price. So because the situation was that oil changed from $30 per barrel in 1998 when we started the project to 130, almost 130 in 2008, when we could sum up if we did it. I mean, the payback time was reduced radically by the saved money from using local resources instead of imported fuels. We have a discussion today. We should change now to heat pumps because we shouldn't burn things. I think Brian agrees with that. And we have introduced. We have the highest number of electric vehicles per capita, which is maybe I know statistic is nice, but it's also an investment. We try to use the electricity produced from our wind turbines locally in fleets also. We build solar garages and change all the public cars to electric vehicles. So you could say in a small island like this, it's also relevant to do it, but it's also expensive. So we actually prioritize the investment, which is interesting because we have learned that it will pay off at the end of the day. And the municipality used to pay people to drive their own cars when they were doing home service, so they paid a per mile fee for using private cars. This is cheaper to feed in the electricity from the solar panels to the cars, so per kilometer, from a service point of view, it is cheaper for the municipality to drive electric cars, which is interesting, that this is a driver for this also. We have learned that it is not just about having visions and being kind of trying to save the climate. So I try to break it up also. Sustainability is a kind of a random fashion word everybody's using. I mean, everything is sustainable somehow, or maybe not, but a lot of things can be sustainable if you explain it. For us, it's about sustain and to be able to do it. So there's kind of a capacity building in this also, where we try to teach and educate people to be able to do things and to be able to understand where and when they should act and how we are going to change the situation of today. So the ability of doing things is a driver for us, because it means that we can take on the job ourselves and we can create development that will help the local the future. So how do you define yourself? A strong, sustainable and robust community must share locality, activity and mentality. So it's interesting when we speak about this. A lot of people commit to the UN development goals and are very big fans of Greta Thunberg, and we want to save the world. I mean, we can agree on that. But when it comes to a local community, it's different. So checking the mentality of people is interesting. What makes people tick? What makes people act? What makes people go to the meeting and commit to things and say, yes, I want to do this? What makes people to take up the wallet and invest in their own infrastructure? This is interesting. Getting started with transformation and change can be difficult, even if there's no shortage of good ideas and goodwill. But local communities have the potential to become pioneer communities and open the way for change. If you can create a feeling of this is what we do, then people will do much more than they anticipated before they left their coffee cup at home and went to the meeting. All of a sudden they feel that we are now moving. Things are happening. I want to be on board and be part of this process. This is an interesting change. It's a very psychological, exercise, but it's necessary for this to happen. I mean, sorry about those who already saw this. This is kind of my strong point of view. I use it quite a lot. This is my island. This is how it looked from Google. But this is not just one island, one little cute island where people are friends and we help each other and this is very social. And no, we're not. We are greedy and angry and aggressive, and we dislike each other a lot. So we have like many communities. In the south end of the island, this is where we have the capital, where we have the mayor's office, and we have the banks and the downtown red light district, and this is where all the activity is happening here. And then we have like a jungle here, which is a very protected area, Ramsar, for birds and migrating birds and nesting. And then we have a little community out here in the north who are they have been very isolated for many years, and there's sign of inbred families there also, and you can see it when you get out there. They are differently built. They have shorter legs and bigger heads and stuff like. Did I mention I live down here in the south end of the island? Maybe that was obvious. But it's just how do we make this community consist of many little communities work together? But there's a lot of old stories that keeps people apart, and this is a kind of very traditional rural story that people on the other side of the river, on the other side of the mountain, you probably know that from home, are a little bit different. Not like us. They are different, which is important to know. So this is Denmark. I mean, as you know, we are over here in Copenhagen, which is almost Sweden. I mean, it's so close to Sweden. It was from the old days when we ruled Sweden and Norway. Then it was more central, but today it's not. I mean, the capital should be here, obviously. And this is the European Union. This is the same thing. You could say that. And this is the world. I mean, some of you are surprised. I can see that, but it's my point is that everybody is living in the center of the universe, and this is where the important things happen. This is from home. It's not somewhere out in some neutral, no-name area of everything. It has to be here somehow. So the value of here is very important for this to happen. I think if there's many heres, there will be like the community of energy is interesting to talk about. How do we create many heres? We have common ground, but many different reasons also. We need, in a rural community and small communities, to accept the difference. Where I think in the urban communities, we kind of gather with people we are like-minded. We like to be with, we have the same opinions, we think the same. Where in the community, we have to be doing things with our neighbor, even if he's an ignorant idiot. I mean, we still need to lend his tractor or have a good appointment with him. So the share car idea, where you have an app, you can share cars in Copenhagen, works perfectly on an island. I just leave my car there with the keys in, and I take another car from the farmer if I need a truck and stuff like that. It works. So that's not a problem. But therefore, I also have to be nice to him. Otherwise, it'll not work. So we have this. We have different reasons to be part of that, and very common ground for this also. Power without love is coarse and ruthless. Love without power is sentimental. I mean, I don't know if there's any hippies in the room. There's some bald people. They could be former hippies somehow. Henrik, you have been a hippie once. Yeah, I'm sure. There's another one over here. It's a scarce species. There's not many left of them. But these hippies, they wanted to save the world, but they couldn't do it. I mean, if they were not kind of matched with the power people, because we need power and financing to do this also. So this is what we exercise in all the time, bring in differences and make people talk about how we visionize or how we see the future, and then on the practical note, how we finance it and how we practically do things. And I think that is working. All right. Visions are interesting. When we create a common sense of ownership, the road is open for development. So the pre-phase of this is to create a common sense of ownership. How do you do that? If you don't feel that you own the future, if you don't feel that you're part of the planning, then you don't have a say in it. You become an ignorant consumer. And ignorant consumers are aggressive. They are critical. They are arrogant. If I'm not getting what I'm paying for, I become disappointed. But if you are part of the process here also, you accept differences, you accept mistakes and failures, you accept the process of learning and stuff like that, and I think that is really valuable. This is the steep learning curve. This is a former mayor putting up, that was a big celebration, putting up a few flatbed solar panels. But that's many years ago. I mean, we celebrated, every time we did something, we celebrated and had beers. I think that's maybe a very strong component of success. This is to celebrate any little action with beer. So we presented these ideas here. This is the Samsø renewable energy supply. This is a combined district heating system on Samsø. This graphic was presented in public meetings and said to them, this is what we're going to do, people. What do you think about it? And I think it became just as quiet as in here. I think people were sitting there thinking, wow, this is something from Copenhagen or somewhere. I mean, if we keep quiet long enough, it'll pass. They'll forget about it and go home again, and we can be in peace and do whatever we used to do also. But this was a graphic that actually indicated that there was a ferry from the mainland landing here, there was another ferry going to Zealand, and they had a lot of cooling water from their engines. We could carry on some trailers and heat up the cooling water and introduce that to the district heating and make the string of pearls as a district heating system. Isn't that a great idea? People thought we were out of our mind. I mean, this is not going to work, never, ever. Let's keep our little oil furnaces in every house here also. So the convincing story was different, that we actually talked to farmers about could they supply the straw for what price? How would the energy system work in the future? Could we actually see this? And who was driving the process? Well, the plumber and the blacksmiths, because they could see all the jobs here. There was miles and miles of piping and exchange of oil furnaces and heat exchangers in house and stuff like that. What's not to like when you're installing systems here also? So we went to that point, the road was open for development. So this graphic here is very simple and it didn't say anything, but it opened a market for local innovation. And I think that was the main driver, not saving the earth or the planet or something like that. And I mean, fire is fire. Every grown boy wants to burn something and heat something. So that was a playground for these guys also. They loved it. And the technology is so simple that kind of a farm plumber, a farm blacksmith, he can fix these things here also. So it's not complicated. It's actually just simple, scalable projects. And this is set up for this also. All right, so the celebration, you can see that guys here, they have beers in their hands here. So this is another celebration. Opening of the district heating, and the chairman of this North Island system, he is not on the podium. He said, "We all did this together. I'm not standing higher than any of you." Very social, very responsible also, and successful also, because it was not meant to be, but it became a project anyway. Because it was on the North Island we started this project, and I said to them, "It'll probably never happen here in the North Island. You are not as developed as the rest of the island, and you're not capable of making these decisions." After 1 month, they had 81% signed contracts to be there. Sport is a good thing also. And then we went on to the bigger projects. I mean, we did some really huge installations these years. It's going really fast. It was groundbreaking, many things. Radical societal development calls for top-down and bottom-up to walk hand in hand. So taking on this project, he also called for us to call somebody from kind of top-down to help us here. If we hadn't had a feed-in tariff or a Danish political system, we could never have done this. So the top-down administration was about framing a policy that was working in favor of decentralized local development. So kind of we were helped big time by the Energy Agency of Denmark, by the Danish political system, and also by many other consultants who were helping us do this. So it's also about defining the project and then reaching out and getting the right kind of backup system working for you. So these guys are local people. I mean, you can see this guy is from the north end of the island, but the rest is from the south, kind of more grown and well. Sorry. We are in Blood Industries up in Aalborg. We were looking at the foundations of our new wind turbines. We put everybody in a bus and we drove up there to see the new investments. I mean, it was the biggest investment in Samsø history ever. And it was nice to see these guys walk around in the factory. Maybe this guy he bought one share, like, I don't know, $300 worth of a share in a wind turbine, but he was a co-owner. So they were walking around with their hard hats on, kind of being very important. And all right, let's buy 10 of these guys. And you can see when we returned to Samsø, we had to get into the bus. You can see that they were actually growing, and they kind of felt very important. You know how guys they are when they are doing something important. They kind of stretch their backs and they become very wide. They had to go sideways through the bus door to get in there. And the stories and the narrative of us doing things here also became kind of a strong metaphor for development also on the way back. And we talked about what is the next business we're going to take on. If you want to develop and change, it's important to meet people where they are. So we need to meet at the level of understanding that kind of starts with your own business. I mean, what's the farmer's point of view? What's the burning platform for the guy who is looking for a job? Is there a job in this also? So the driver can be multiple. It is many different reasons for this to happen. So the most sensitive phase in all projects is the startup. How is support secured, how to organize, how to secure the necessary participation of the local community. For pioneer projects in local communities, a solution can be to build on foundations already in place and, for instance, establish an association, like a work group. So if I talk to you like a village, do you want to participate in this work? Anybody who wants to stand up and be part of a work group? Yes? Oh, there's one nodding. You can be the chairman. Because we need to organize it locally, so we follow and feel ownership of this development. That's the way to make a successful development. If it's a consultant or developer from outside, you know, if there's a mistake there, the blame will put only one way, and we'll never come to a solution. We'll only complain about the bad management. So bringing people together in this voice is really good. Early consideration, will anyone invest in it? I mean, these are all questions. Who will take the profit? Who will take the risk? What's in it for the community? What's in it for me? So this what's in it element is very important to kind of calculate and measure and say to them, for you, you can save energy by buying your energy heat from the local nearby district heating. It's 20% cheaper than oil. And the plumber would advocate this is a good idea because I will now hire 2 more hands to work with this also. So the story will be that the what's in it for me, community and personal, is a driver more than anything else. But therefore, you need also, when you do the planning, you need to do the math on how many jobs will come out of this, what's the profit, what's the 10-year payback for this installation, seen from a household owner's point of view or a business owner's point of view. Some of the heating system here is based on local resources already met. We have a very big onion farmer, and he is producing 7,000 tons of onions per year. He is living next door to the solar panels, the hot water solar panels, and they are producing a hell of a lot of water, hot water in the summertime, where nobody is, I mean, especially the people from the north, they don't shower very much. I mean, they are from the north. Maybe every Christmas they have a kind of I can't avoid it, but they will then buy the surplus production from the solar panels to dry their onions instead of imported gas from the outside. So all these practical, pragmatic solutions to make this happen. Individual kind of activities also into how do you define leadership? We have talked a lot about how do we create the next generation leaders, and we have a problem right now. We call them I think it's called the meta generation. The meta generation is young families with kids today. They are not active. They are very active, but not in the planning of society. And I think that is a challenge also for us today, because the previous generation was brought up in organization structures. They were used to be chairmen and participate in an organization. The next generation is not. So we try to make a new identification tool and find out how do we identify the next generation's leaders, because this is needed here also. We try to work on with the Nordic trust. We have something we call trust in Norway, in the Nordic countries. I don't know if you have that in other countries, but trust is a... we have this metaphor that Denmark is the most happy nation in the world, has been. I think it's Finland these years. I wonder why, but in the trust thing is that we trust each other. I mean, imagine these guys rowing all the way to Newfoundland, sitting in an open boat. They must have trusted each other, otherwise they have owed each other a lot of money. I don't know what happened. But if you sit in a boat and do things like this is interesting. An experiment does not have to be perfect. Experiments can open the way for something radically new. I mean, when they set off from the west coast of Denmark and rowed all the way over there to Newfoundland, must have been a lot of talks on the way over there. What do you expect to find when we do this? But if they hadn't done it, they wouldn't have discovered anything. So we kind of use the same metaphor for change here also. How do we see the future of my island or any other communities 10 years or 20 years from now on? And see this as a driver for doing something exceptional or something different from what you do here, instead of just business as usual. Find the blacksmith is a metaphor. We see this all over Europe as it is today. We have an association of 300 European islands called the Island Association, and we have signed. There's a sign ceremony where all these islands have signed and committed to a strategy for islands in Europe. We have an ongoing project. Some of our friends who are present here today from Japan. We have an international cooperation for islands also to work with this, because we think and believe that islands are kind of living labs for future innovation and can be test beds for the next generation. The European Union supports this also, so they agree with this. We work with Scandinavian biogas platforms also in the European project and try to kind of find a way to digest biomass material and waste to produce fuel for the transportation in the future. So maybe it's biofuel, as Paul was talking about, ammonium or hydrogen and CO2 in a combination with electricity. But we see a problem also locally that we are actually generating quite a lot of waste, and we are sending that to the mainland, and it's incinerated and used to bring down the cost of heat in Copenhagen and Aarhus and other cities. Why we should use our biological waste here to digest and produce methane, upgrade that, and fuel our ferries and trucks and heavy transportation. We actually bought our new ferry, so this ferry is up and running. It's a 600 passenger car, 160 cars, so it's a pretty big ferry. It's a hybrid ferry. All propellers are driven by electricity, so there's a gas generation in the compartment. So we drive it on gas as it is today, LNG, but it's built to make biogas. It's in operation, and this is kind of telling you something about innovation. We have the capacity now to do this, and if it's like the chicken and the egg, we could wait for this technology to break through, or we could invest it in so we are prepared the market for the production of biogas in the future, which I think is interesting. And now we own the ferry. It's owned by the local municipality, which means that the coffee is better. It's not a private tender, and we can then ask the price also, and we can also decide which kind of fuel we want to use in the future. We couldn't if it was an open market and it was a bidding process with a public tender. Then they'll probably choose the cheapest option here, which still would be oil. So down to baseline is it's all about bread and butter. How do you point out the drivers and reasons for community to take part of this transition that you are working on, seen from the technological planning point of view? Well, if you can point out the bread and butter aspect here, people are ready to do things here also. And then you need to appoint nerdy people like myself and other people also to lead these processes. And this is kind of an arm's length. We have had energy offices and energy NGOs around Denmark all over the place, and I think these guys has been driving the development on the grass level to encourage and inspire people to get their personals out of the house and participate in meetings and make decisions that will change the destiny of their homes. Thank you very much.